Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're peeling back one of India's greatest legends, one that shaped the very idea of what a perfect king should be for centuries. You know the one I'm talking about, Vikramaditya. But was he a real person or just a myth? Well, we're going to hunt for the historical truth behind the legend.
So our story actually starts with a mystery, one that's been standing in Delhi for 1,600 years, literally forged in iron. I'm talking about the famous Iron Pillar. You've probably heard about it. It's defied rust for all this time. But you know, its real secret isn't the metal. It's what's carved on it. The inscription talks about this incredible king named Chandra, a guy who it says conquered his enemies through his own might.
Okay, so the big question is, who was this King Chandra? For, well, centuries, historians have been piecing together the clues. And you know what? The evidence all points overwhelmingly to one man, the Gupta Emperor Chandragupta II. But wait, how does a real historical king become the legendary hero Vikramaditya? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to solve today. Let's dig in.
All right, first things first. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the history, we really have to get a handle on the legend itself. I mean, the name Vikramaditya, it just echoes through Indian folklore, right? He's the gold standard, the ideal ruler. So what was it about this legend that made it so incredibly powerful and lasting?
Let's go back to that Iron Pillar for a second, because it gives us a fantastic glimpse into this legendary power. It describes this king facing down a whole alliance of enemies over in Bengal. And get this, it says he, through his own sheer force, kneaded them into submission. Kneaded, like dough. I mean, that's not just a victory, is it? That is absolute total domination. That's the kind of epic story that just begs to become a myth.
And all of that incredible power, all that might, was captured in this one single title, Vikramaditya. It literally means son of valor. How cool is that? It became more than just a name. It was a benchmark for what it meant to be a great king. You see, later kings would actually adopt the title for themselves, just trying to get a little bit of that legendary shine. But all the evidence points to the original, the real deal, being Chandragupta II.
Okay, but here's where things get interesting. The guy who would become this shining legend, well, he had a surprisingly controversial start. Yeah, the official story paints a picture of a really smooth, easy succession. But there's this other tale, a much more scandalous one, that suggests his climb to the top was, let's just say, anything but honorable.
So on one hand, you've got the official version, right? The Gupta inscriptions, carved in stone, they all say he was the chosen son, the successor to the great emperor Samudragupta. Pretty straightforward. But then, you have this dramatic Sanskrit play, the Devi Chandraguptam, and it tells a completely different, totally shocking story. It says his older brother, a guy named Ramagupta, was actually the rightful heir, and that he was, well, kind of weak-willed.
And this is where the story goes from just being political to being, well, wild. According to this play, King Ramagupta is about to be defeated by a Shaka chief. These were foreign rulers in Western India, and he agrees to this shameful deal to surrender his own wife, Queen Devi, to the enemy. Can you imagine? Well, his younger brother Chandragupta was absolutely furious. So he comes up with his daring, almost crazy plot. He disguises himself as the queen, goes into the enemy camp with his men, and kills the Shaka chief. And it doesn't stop there. He then comes back, kills his own cowardly brother, and marries Devi himself, basically saving the empire's honor. Now, for the longest time, everyone just thought, okay, this is great drama, but it's just a play. But then, archaeologists actually found coins with the name Ramagupta on them. Suddenly that scandalous story started to look a little less like fiction.
So, whether he stole the throne or just inherited it, one thing is absolutely clear. Chandragupta II was a master at building an empire, and he did it with both brute force and some really clever diplomacy. I mean, his reign lasted for nearly 4 decades, and it was all about relentless expansion. His biggest military win? No question. It was the complete and final destruction of the Western Kshatrapas, the Shakas. Now, you gotta understand what a big deal this was. These foreign kings had ruled Western India for 400 years, and it took Chandragupta 2 whole decades of fighting to finally kick them out for good. But he wasn't just a warrior, he was super strategic when it came to peace too. He arranged this brilliant marriage for his daughter, Prabhavati Gupta, to the powerful Vakataka kingdom in the south. And get this, when her husband died, she became the regent, the ruler. And just like that, a huge kingdom was basically brought under Gupta influence, all without a single arrow being fired. Genius! And you better believe he made sure everyone knew how powerful he was. Think of his titles stamped on coins for the whole world to see, as like ancient branding.
Or maybe news headlines. You had Maharaja de Raja, that's King of Great Kings. Then there was Sakari, a title he took specifically to brag that he was the destroyer of the Shakas. And of course, the one that would echo through history, Vikramaditya.
So, what was the result of all this fighting and all this clever diplomacy? An empire at its absolute peak. I mean, from the Indus River all the way to Bengal, he was in charge of this massive, unified territory. And here's the crucial part. By winning in the West, he got control of the seaports. This opened up what was basically a fire hose of trade and wealth pouring in from places as far away as the Roman Empire. The empire wasn't just big, it was rich.
Okay, so the empire is secure, the borders are bigger than ever, and money is flowing in. What happens next? Well, Chandragupta's reign kicks off this era of just incredible cultural and scientific growth. It's what people today often call the Golden Age of India.
And you know what's great? We don't just have to take the king's own word for it, from his coins and inscriptions. We actually have an amazing eyewitness account from someone totally neutral. A Chinese Buddhist monk named Foxian traveled all through India during this period. And even though he doesn't mention the emperor by name, he paints this incredible picture of a peaceful, wealthy, and really well-run empire.
Yeah, when you read Foxian's journals, it sounds almost utopian. He wrote that serious crime was super rare. The government didn't use executions or really harsh punishments. He says people weren't weighed down by heavy taxes or a bunch of regulations. And get this, the big cities had free hospitals and charities for the people. I mean, this was a society that was clearly enjoying a massive amount of peace and stability.
So, when you have an empire that's this stable and this wealthy, it's going to be a magnet for talent, right? And this brings us to one of the most famous parts of the Vikramaditya legend, the story of the Navaratnas, or the 9 gems. This idea of a royal court filled with the 9 greatest minds of the era. But is there any truth to that story?
Well, the reality is, it's a bit more complicated. The whole idea of a specific, formal group of 9 gems is probably something that was added to the story later on, to romanticize the era. In fact, some of the famous names on that list actually lived in totally different centuries. But, and this is a big but, there is zero doubt that Chandragupta was a huge patron of culture. For example, it's widely believed that India's greatest poet and playwright, the legendary Kalidasa, was part of his court. So while the 9 gems as a team might be a myth, the king's support for the arts and sciences, that was absolutely real.
So let's pull all these threads together. What is Chandragupta II's ultimate legacy? How did this very real man manage to forge a myth that would endure for literally thousands of years?
It really comes down to 5 key pillars. First, he was the conqueror, the one who finally ended centuries of foreign rule by the Shakas. Second, he was the diplomat, using smart marriages to protect his borders without war. Third, he was the administrator, who managed an age of unbelievable peace and prosperity. Fourth, he was the patron, who poured money into the arts and helped create a cultural golden age. And finally, when you add all of that up, he became the inspiration for one of the greatest legends of all time.
When you think about it, his real-life achievements were just so huge, so monumental, that they were the perfect raw material to build a myth from. Here was a real historical king who seemed to embody all the qualities we want in a legendary hero, right? Courage, wisdom, a sense of justice. His actual life became the blueprint for all the Vikramaditya stories that would inspire people in India for generations to come.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. Did Chandragupta II actually create a golden age, or did he just create the legend of one? A story so powerful, so perfect, that it kind of became history itself. Maybe the real answer is that he did both. And it's in that fascinating, blurry line between the man and the myth that the legacy of Vikramaditya still lives on. Thanks for watching The Explainer.